Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today for this next installment of the Inner Source Health webinar series. My name is Dr. Robert Kochko. I'm one of the naturopathic doctors and licensed acupuncturist at Inner Source Health. And I'm thrilled about the topic of this talk. I do a lot of work also in the healthy aging world. But one thing that happens curiously is that most people don't come in for healthy aging, but once we can get them feeling better for the main condition that they're concerned about, that's always the next question is, well, what do I do either from the prevention perspective or what do I do to help myself live as long as possible and really focusing on quality of life as opposed to just quantity. And so I'm thrilled about this talk because Dr. Bongiorno is going to distill what it is that's actually proven to work and what might be a little bit overblown or just marketing hype at this point. So a little bit about Dr. Peter Bongiorno. He's co-director of Inner Source Health, our clinic. Before medical school, he researched as a pre-doctoral fellow at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, and at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, and co-authored numerous medical journals in the field of neuroendocrinology, which studies how the body's stress, hormone, and immune system all talk to each other. As a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist, he was recently president of the New York Association of Naturopathic Physicians and was named NYANP Physician of the Year. As an accomplished national speaker and published author, Dr. Bongiorno's focus is mental and emotional health for the whole family, and his latest book is called Put Anxiety Behind You. So without further ado, my friend and colleague, Dr. Peter Bongiorno.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you. And by the way, Dr. Robert Kochko is the incoming president of the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians, which is the national association for all naturopaths. So he's really the leader of the naturopathic community nationally. So thank you, Rob. It's really an honor to have you introducing me. And I was wondering if I can get the video on for a second to say hi to everybody. Let's see, you can't start the video because the host has stopped it. Okay. All right, well, maybe we can get that.
If I make you a host right now, that might limit my ability to hop on the mic.
That's okay. I'm okay looking, but I'm not that great or anything.
I'm not seeing a way to do it. So
that's okay. All right, so let's just get started. So we're going to talk about longevity medicine, what works and what doesn't for healthy aging. So this is all the wonderful people I work with at Inner Source. That's Lindsay on the left, who does a wonderful job as our office manager. Dr. Pinolo Giudice, Dr. Liotta, who's an amazing acupuncturist and massage therapist, and Dr. Siglan, who's a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist in our Long Island office, as well as Dr. Robert, who you just heard from as our host. Okay, so healthy aging. So we're going to talk a little bit about facts about life expectancy. We're going to talk about aging theories, like what's the reason we age. And then we're going to give some recommendations based on pretty solid research. So in 2005, the New England Journal of Medicine published a paper stating that for the first time in that year, children would not live as long as their parents, which is amazing because we spend about 2.5 times more than the next country for healthcare. We rate about 37th in the world, and our health expectancy is only declining. So what could be the reasons for that? Because, you know, my understanding growing up is we had the top healthcare in the world, and we had the greatest technology and the best doctors. And so how is this possible that life expectancy is actually declining? Not only is life expectancy declining, I do a lot of work with mood disorder, but suicides themselves and depression and anxiety are at peak levels, and people are taking more medications for these things than ever. In fact, if you look at the life expectancy data overall, which includes suicides, the United States is faring poorly and going downward. So if you look at that in terms of other countries like Japan and France and Britain. So the British Journal of Cancer in 2011 looked at, it was a huge epidemiologic study that looked at a few 100,000 people and looked at what was causing disease, specifically what was causing cancer. And what they found is that many of the cancers that we unfortunately deal with are very changeable by things like diet and lifestyle, getting rid of toxins and the things that we have the power to change. So what we're learning is while life expectancy is declining, we're learning more and more through the research that it's actually things we have control of that are taking that are a huge part of whether life expectancy goes up and goes down. Years ago, we used to think, well, you get handed a deck of cards when you're born, and these are the genes you get, and that, if you're going to get a disease when you're 35, you're going to get a disease. There's nothing you can do. And if you're going to get a heart attack at 60, you're going to get a heart attack. There's nothing you can do. Those are your genes. Well, we're really starting to learn that most of the aging process is not actually due to genes, but again, due to things we have control over, our diet and our lifestyle. If we look at the blue zones, which are the areas of the world where people live the longest, there's a lot of similarities among them. People have a strong sense of community. They eat good quality food. They have movement, maybe not formal exercise, but they have movement most of their days. They drink good quality water. And typically they follow something that's similar to a style of the Mediterranean diet. So I think these are very interesting studies. There's books on the subject if you're really interested, because, when you think about it, this is the ultimate study. Who is living the longest and what are they doing? Because that's probably better than any other data that we have. So why do we age? When we're born, we're these little babies and we're so cute, and we get older and then we start to get a little wrinkly and then we start to get slower. And why does that process happen? Why with birth, reproduction, and senescence, which is sort of decline? What's the reason for that? Why don't we just stay one age and stay young and stay healthy all the time? Well, there's two theories. One theory is that we accumulate a lot of toxins, and that over time, those toxins kind of break down our bodies. Then the second theory is that we have these genes in our body that hold our genetic material called DNA, and the DNA starts to fragment and break apart. In fact, there's these little caps on the top of the DNA. If you look at this picture at the bottom right here, this is a chromatin, this is a piece of DNA, and at the very top there's these little caps, which I have this picture on the left. This was one of my shoelaces from a pair of brown shoes that I have. And if you notice that the shoelace here on the left has what's called an aglet on it, right? And the aglet protects the shoelace from fraying. And if you look at the shoelace on the right, where the aglet is broken, the shoelace frays. So the second theory of aging is that we have these little caps on the top of our DNA, sort of like aglets, and these things break apart, and then our DNA gets exposed and they can break apart. So what are the steps to healthy aging? The steps to healthy aging in general, and if you had to pick one slide out of this whole lectures, I would say this would be the slide to think about. Are we exercising? Are we taking in too many calories? What are our food choices? Are we sleeping enough? Do we use conventional medicine properly? Do we avoid medications when possible? What is our spirit and what is our passions? And what supplements and nutrients can we use to support the processes of healthy aging? So that's the general summary, and we will return. So let's talk about exercise. Okay. Now, exercise does so many things for the body. It lowers blood pressure, lowers inflammation, balances blood sugar, helps the kidneys detox, lower risk of cancer. So remember before we talked about the two theories of aging, right? One theory is that toxins build up, and another theory is that the protective coats of the ends of the DNA break down. Well, exercise has been proven to help clean out toxins in their body, which will help that first issue, and also protects the telomeres and keeps them stronger to protect our DNA, which is that second issue we talked about. So exercise does both of those things. And it is one of the few things that, when done properly, is proven to extend life expectancy. Our bodies are made to move. There's no way to be healthy if we're not moving. And I dare say that if I had to pick between exercise or eating healthy, I would probably pick exercise. Of course, you want to do both for best results. But if you can only pick one, I would probably pick exercise, because if you're not moving your body, it's impossible to stay healthy, and it's impossible not to age quicker than you need to. There's one study at the University of Copenhagen, and what they showed in people who jogged is that runners, generally joggers, so not even people who were running fast, but joggers, live 6.2 years longer for the men and 5.6 years longer for the women. Now that's pretty incredible. And think about this. Do you know of any drug that if you took it, you could live an average of 5 to 6 years longer? If there was a drug that had no side effects that would allow me to do that, I would take that in a minute. But we have exercise. You know, if there was a drug, it would be plastered all over the news media, and companies would be making billions of dollars on it. But I don't know if you've heard about this study. Probably not, because the media doesn't really talk about it, because unfortunately, there's really no, there's not much of financial gain to talk about this Copenhagen jogger study. And yet, to me, this is one of the most profound studies on exercise and longevity that's come out. And what they found in this particular study is that the biggest improvement were those who jogged from 1 to 2.5 hours a week and then took 2 days off. Interestingly, if people jogged a bit more, those who ran 4 hours or more at a fast pace of 7 miles an hour, they actually lost much or all of the longevity benefits. And people who did a lot more running actually did not live as long. So interestingly, not only has it been proven to help life extension, but also if you do too much of it, it actually works against us. And I think that's because of the toxin theory. When you exercise, you metabolize your system at a much higher rate, and it produces a lot more toxins, which your body has to take care of. And that actually becomes hard on different parts of the cell. So everything's about moderation. And in terms of exercise, what's been shown is to go gentler and be consistent probably works the best and increases longevity the most. Really fascinating stuff. So I thought they said rum. Okay, so caloric restriction is number 2. So what does caloric restriction mean? Does this mean that we shouldn't be eating food? Well, according to these mice studies, what they showed is that mice who were fed, and this is 1935, so this isn't new information, the mice that were fed 30% fewer calories. Now, they got enough nutrients, they got enough protein, they got the correct number of vitamins, they got enough fat for their bodies, but they got 30% less calories, lived about 40% longer than the animals who were allowed to just graze on their own. The dieting mice were also more physically active and far less prone to diseases of aging. These studies have also been repeated about a decade or two ago in monkeys, and these are the monkeys that participated in some of these studies, and they showed the same thing, that the Rhesus monkeys that ate less calories were more energetic, had less signs of aging, and lived a bit longer. According to Dr. Lorenz from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, caloric restriction mitigates every disease of aging. And from Dr. Sinclair, who studies a lot about telomeres, which we talked about earlier, he's a molecular biologist at Harvard, he's quoted as saying, "It's just a big waste of talent and wisdom to have people die in their 60s and in their 70s. So these guys know, by studying these things, that there's no reason why we can't live healthily into much older ages than we are. Coffee drinkers. So what about coffee? Coffee drinkers are more likely to live longer. And actually decaf might do the trick too. And this is from the Journal of Internal Medicine from last year, 2018. Why does coffee tend to increase life expectancy? Well, that's probably because it has a lot of really good, important compounds called theoflavins, which are very helpful nutrients to our cells in the body and are good antioxidants. Now, if you're not sleeping and you have a lot of anxiety and you get a lot of palpitations, then maybe coffee is not for you. So it's not necessarily for everyone. But if you sleep well and you're not too stressed out, you're not too anxious, probably drinking coffee regularly 1 or 2 cups a day isn't a bad idea. I generally recommend it without sugar and without dairy products and milk and stuff like that. So number 3, avoid AGEs. So what are AGEs? So AGEs stand for advanced glycation end products. And these are basically chemical compounds that are produced when you cook food, especially protein, at a very high temperature. So when you cook at a high temperature, these proteins, especially if there's sugars and carbs around the protein, they kind of mix and create these inflammatory molecules. And what's been shown is that the higher a temperature you cook the food, the more likely you're going to create these advanced glycation end products. So raw foods would have the lowest advanced glycation end products, and fried foods would probably have some of the highest, and then there's all these in between. So in general, it's a good idea to cook your food at lower temperatures. Now, some people can't eat all raw foods because it's kind of hard on the system and it's hard to extract all the nutrients, especially if your digestion isn't strong. So for those of you who can't really do raw foods until your stomach gets a bit stronger and your digestion is stronger, then I recommend boiling and baking. I love crock pots. I think that's a wonderful way to cook your food because it really holds a lot of the nutrients and cooks it at lower temperatures, which keeps the advanced glycation end products very low. So that's definitely something to think about. Are grains a good idea or a bad idea? And these are books that have come out that have been very popular, really demonizing grains. Now, there's no question that taking in too many carbohydrates is a problem because too many calories will decrease your life expectancy. We proved that with the mice studies and with the Rhesus monkey studies. But grains themselves have actually a lot of good nutrients too. So if you're not allergic to gluten, and you're not sensitive to gluten, then probably excluding grains may not be a good idea. In fact, there's this one study, again, from the Journal of the American Medical Association, over 100,000 people who consume more whole grains was linked with a decreased risk of dying, mainly from cardiovascular disease. So there seems to be very good heart protective compounds in grains. They had a 5% lower total mortality, meaning of dying, and up to almost 10% lower risk of cardiovascular deaths. No change in cancer deaths. So it seems like cancer maybe is you need to get more antioxidants or other things in, but the grains have things like B vitamins and compounds that are very good for the vascular system. What do I recommend to patients? If you can have gluten and gluten isn't sensitive for you, I love these German breads, which are very, very healthy. Those German breads, there's a picture there. It looks like a brick and it weighs about 20 pounds. And it's just really solid, unprocessed, good quality bread. Ezekiel breads are pretty good breads. They have a lot of good fiber in them. So it's something to think about. Even though I love Italian bread, which I grew up with, Italian bread, unfortunately, is just very processed white flour. So I really try to stay away from those things now and eat breads that look more like this. So what to eat in general? If I don't know a person and I don't know their individual needs and their sensitivities, I generally recommend a good quality Mediterranean diet. They're getting plenty of good water. They're eating good fish, foods that are low glycemic, meaning aren't sugary, high proteins. I love oatmeal. It's very calming to the nervous system, and it's a beautiful insoluble fiber with some soluble fiber. Almonds, pomegranates, and then of course watching for food allergies and sensitivities and adjusting the diet based on that as well. This is what a Mediterranean diet is. Minimal alcohol intake of beans, whole grain cereals, fruits, vegetables, high fish intake. In fact, the patient I just saw today was telling me she was on a diet, I think it was called the SANE diet, and they took out all the grains and all the legumes. And that's not good for a lot of people. In fact, sometimes you need those even to produce serotonin in your brain for good mood. So even though a lot of these diets sound good and might be good therapeutically in the short term, you have to decide or work with a good practitioner who will understand your body to know whether really diets like that are good for the long term and are protective for you. That's my daughter. That's one of the typical breakfasts that she eats in the morning. So that's oatmeal, and there's nuts there, and let's see, that day we had dragon fruit on the side. We don't usually eat dragon fruit. There's raspberries, there's some dates, there's prunes, so all these different things. There's a chocolate milk that's made out of almond milk with a high quality chocolate there. So even chocolate has good flavonoids, which, in the morning for a child, it's a treat, and yet it's pretty healthy as long as the sugar content's low. So things like that are really great to get in. You get your fibers, you get your antioxidants, you get some protein, it's a great way to start the day. So sleep is critically important. That is when your body fixes things and de-inflames. And this study from 2014 shows us that human longevity is associated with regular sleep patterns, maintenance of slow wave sleep, and favorable lipid profile. So when we sleep well, we have good sleep patterns. The slow wave sleep allows our body to fix things and de-inflame. And even in this particular study, it shows how it balances our cholesterol and our triglycerides. So, which of course is going to be protective for cardiovascular disease. I generally recommend people getting about 8 hours and trying to get to bed as way before midnight as you can. I like to get to bed by 10 at the latest. And I know for some of you listening, that sounds crazy early. But I tell you, you get to bed early, you wake up early, you feel amazing the next day. The colors are brighter, you're much, much more productive. So it's not like you have to sleep longer, but when you get to bed earlier, you get a better quality of sleep because your melatonin gets released early, and that really starts the process of your body cleaning out and detoxing and fixing things. What about prevention and early detection? I think this is where modern medicine really plays a wonderful role. So I think if you have a good general practitioner, a conventional medical doctor, don't throw that away. Because that's very, very valuable as well. There are things that conventional medicine is great at, certainly with emergency medicine, dental care, which is important for overall health. Getting a colonoscopy, I think, makes sense. Because if you find, you're not preventing anything, but if you find something early, that's the time you can take care of it. Having a skin doctor look at your skin, having a urologist look at your prostate specific antigen if you're a man. Actually, Dr. Robert Kochko is, I think, one of the leading experts in understanding what's called a Boston heart panel, which is the new VAP. I wrote that there. That's a heart panel, but it's not just lipids. It actually shows a lot of other inflammatory markers, fatty acids, and actually I send my patients to Dr. Rob for that purpose because he understands it at a very high level. In fact, we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago about that very topic. So if you're interested in really excellent heart care and heart health, I strongly suggest you listen to his webinar on the Boston Heart Panel and what that can offer to help prevent and treat heart conditions. Looking at blood sugar is very important, looking at your thyroid, getting your blood pressure checked. And then for women, certainly getting proper gynecologic exams and mammograms. I think that's a huge topic. And even conventional medicine is realizing that mammograms may not be as beneficial to do as often as we've been doing them. So, so that's something you should talk with your doctor about, with your naturopath, and find out, well, what would be a good regimen for that? What other alternatives are there for in-between times? And how can you use natural and conventional medicine together to really get the best results? Okay. So, and in general, I definitely recommend when you're working with a conventional doctor to pick someone who you feel cares and you feel sees you as you are, especially as we get older. I know sometimes conventional doctors, they're so busy, they see an older person come in and they go, they're just old and that's just how it is. Well, I know I wouldn't want to be treated that way, and I think all my patients don't want to be treated that way either. They want someone who's going to sit and listen to them at any age, whether they're 105 or 55 or 25. You want to sit, listen to a patient, find out what their needs are, and really understand how to best help them so they can feel their best. Avoiding medication. So we said earlier that one of the theories about aging is toxins. And medications, even though they can be life-saving from time to time, they are toxic. In fact, conventional medications is the fourth leading cause of death. And that's when they're properly used. So we're not talking about overdosing or improper use of the medications. Properly used medications, fourth leading cause of death, according to the Journal of the American Medical Association. So we really have to be judicious in how we use these and try not to use them unless it's absolutely necessary. I like to talk about spirit and passion with my patients, right? So what's the reason to be healthy? To go out and do the things you love to do, right? So if your mood isn't there and your passion isn't there, it's gonna be an issue in terms of your overall health and longevity. I have patients who ask me, especially if they're older, is sex good for me? Well, sexual activity actually does have benefits, although it's been shown for men, if it's very high frequency, it can be a risk factor for heart disease. So I think the men have to be careful as we get older. Like, too much is no good either, right? But good sexual quality also seems to protect women from cardiovascular disease later in life. So it's probably better for women and maybe just not too much for men. So that's an interesting thing. According to Shakespeare, a merry heart goes all the day and your sad heart tires in a mile. So Shakespeare knew back then, hundreds of years ago, that when you're happy, your heart is healthier. And he says, and this is a quote from King Lear, "In gratitude, thou marble-hearted fiend." So he's also saying there, when you don't have gratitude, your heart gets marbleized, it gets harder, and marbleization is another way of saying fat gets deposited around the heart. So Shakespeare was saying, when you don't have gratitude, fat deposits around your heart. so he knew back then the association between being happy or not having gratitude and what can happen with heart health. Pretty interesting stuff. There's a study that they reviewed in the New York Times in 2007. A few extra years of school is associated with extra years of life and vastly improved health decades later in old age. So learning new things seems to be very associated with longevity. And these people, these elderly gentlemen and elderly women who are constantly reading. They have a ton of books on their shelves that they've read. They're reading the newspaper. They're learning new things. They're listening to new music. And they just seem to be vital and doing well. Well, besides physical exercise, mental exercise also seems to be highly, highly related to living longer. So as we age, it's really important to do that. Pick up a musical instrument you haven't heard, start learning a language, put on the radio and listen to the new songs that the kids are listening to. I know we have a habit of going, it's not as good as the music we had, but you know what? We've been saying that for decades. I think when Mozart came out, they said the same thing about him too, that was just rubbish. And so we have to keep, we have to try to stay up to date and try to stay vigorous and vital with what's going on. That will keep us healthy. I know one of the best things for my mom was getting her an iPad, which at first she wasn't a fan of. She didn't want to learn the new technology. But years later, she says that's the best thing, we ever gave her as a present. So I was excited about that. So what supplements are good for longevity? So I'll start by saying there's no supplement that you take and it's going to help you live longer. So, and I know that, you look at the commercials and you look at what's in the health food stores and you look at what's online, and they're all touting these amazing benefits and this new super nutrient that's going to make you live years longer. And every time they come out, they sound amazing. And it really, none of them ever seem to live up to that hype. But to tell you the truth, I think many of them do have some benefit, and then put together with all the things we've just talked about, absolutely will support your body and help the process of living to your optimal health and living the longest you can. So what are the specific supplements I think about? In general, I like a good multiple vitamin, not high dose, but low dose, just to cover the bases of all the things your mitochondria have to do to make energy, and your liver has to do to clean out, and your brain has to do to make neurotransmitters. So taking a good multiple vitamin can cover a lot of those bases. Good quality fish oil for most people has excellent benefits. There are some genetic tests which might suggest that you don't want to overdo fish oil in certain populations. And again, you can listen to Dr. Rob Kochko's lecture about that. But for the most part, fish oil is very healthy for the majority of people. Years ago, there was this horrible media storm saying that fish oil caused prostate cancer. And that was honestly just ridiculous. The studies that supposedly showed that didn't even study fish oil for that purpose. And I think that was just a lot of hype to sell newspapers and ad space. Bone formula, especially for women who tend towards osteoporosis, and not just calcium, cheap calcium and a little vitamin D, but really a complex of things that can help the lattice work of the bones. Cancer prevention, I like things like vitamin D, green tea, black cohosh, which is a good herb for hormones and mood, and also saw palmetto, which is a great herb for prostate. And then for heart health, things like garlic and red wine, which has resveratrol. Fermented foods has also been shown to enhance lifespan. That's why years ago they had those commercials of the people in Russia eating yogurt and dancing into their 120s. There is some truth to that. Fermented foods does seem to do that, and that's probably because it helps the microbiome, which is the good bacteria in your digestive tract, keep your digestion in balance. And when your digestion is in balance, your inflammation is lower, you keep less weight on, you balance your blood sugar, and it also balances the neurotransmitters in your brain that help with behavior, that help for good longevity. So there's a lot of reasons why eating fermented food and probiotics can be helpful too. I just wanted to mention one or two of my favorites. We use a good multiple vitamin, a good essential fatty acid, and a good probiotic. This picture here shows this guy. If you take too many vitamins, you're going to kind of look like him. So you don't want to take a lot of stuff, but you just want to take a few of the very right things that can support your body. Vitamin D, according to John Denver, sunshine on his shoulders did make him happy, which I think was a reasonable study. And vitamin D has been shown to decrease fracture risk, help neuromuscular function, meaning it helps things like balance. And even though there's been some studies which are starting to conflict with what we learned earlier about neuromuscular function, I think the vast majority of studies show very positive correlations with vitamin D and helping the issue. Vitamin D also correlates with lower colon and breast cancer and a better prognosis if you have those conditions, if your vitamin D was high at the time you got those cancers. Resveratrol, which comes from grapes, have an action that's similar to caloric restriction. There's a molecule called sirtuins, which gets upregulated when you eat less food, and that seems to start off the protective mechanisms in your body. Well, resveratrol can help that as well. And even though I don't think resveratrol by itself is going to make people live longer, I think along with all the other things we're talking about in diet and lifestyle and sleep and all that, it can be very helpful and it's probably worth it. I think one of the new supplements which I love to use in my practice, and we have here at InnerSource, is called Pycnogenol. It's a bioflavonoid-rich plant. It supports glowing skin. It's got good cardiovascular protection. It's blood pressure lowering. It decreases inflammation and actually decreases the amount of advanced glycation end products in your body. So it comes from pine bark, it comes from a tree. And I think it's one of those supplements that years from now you're going to be hearing about a lot, and a lot of people are going to be taking for a whole bunch of reasons. I use it in my patients when they have skin issues, when they have cardiovascular issues, especially with blood pressure. I just think it's one of those things. I take it myself. I think it's a very healthy place to go in terms of supplementation. So on an end note, this is Jean Clement, who died in 1997. She lived to 122 years of age. In fact, she was around when Vincent van Gogh was around, and she met him. She took up fencing at 85, rode a bicycle until she was 100, and lived to 122. So that's what you have to do. You have to take up fencing at 85, you know, and that's the spirit of what you need to do. Maybe you don't need to do fencing itself, but the idea is really, you know, embrace life and keep doing new things. And that's really what it takes. Jack LaLanne lived to 97, and up until almost the very end, he was working out every morning for 2 hours, usually swimming and in the weight room. And he declared 2 simple rules: if man made it, don't eat it, and if it tastes good, spit it out. I don't know about that one, because I actually think a lot of healthy food tastes absolutely amazing. But he often said, people don't die of old age, they die of inactivity. And I think that's very, very true. So keeping the body moving is critical to good health. This is a woman who actually, I think this is from last year's Daily News, a woman who was born in the 1800s and died at 116 years of age. And she credited her long life to getting sleep, not smoking, not drinking, although she ate bacon almost every day. So I can't explain that one, and I'm not recommending eating bacon every day, but I guess because she did the other things, she probably had good liver bacon detoxification. And this fellow, this was came out in Money Magazine last year, and he was 100 years old, and he was quoted. I love this quote in the article. It says, "Some people think I run because I can, but that's backwards. I can because I do." So the idea is you just have to keep doing it. And if you keep doing it, then you can. If you stop doing it, then of course the body is going to stop, because, you know, we're made to be born, to live to the age of reproduction, and then to start declining. And the only way we can slow the decline is to keep our body active, keep our mind active, get the right things in our body, and keep moving. That will stop the decline. If we're not doing those things, then the body doesn't really have the signal to keep going. And then, of course, the Dalai Lama, the true meaning of life. We're visitors here on this planet. We're here for 90 or 100 years at the most. During that period, we must try to do something good, do something useful with our lives. If you contribute to other people's happiness, you will find the true goal and the true meaning of life. And that seems to be true. When you look at people who've lived long and live well, usually they have a purpose and a goal and a lot of gratitude. And that seems to keep them propelled forward to learn new things and do the things they do. So I think the Dalai Lama, I get the Dalai Lama's tweets on Twitter, and it's just very inspiring to hear his words, you know, when it pops up on my phone there. So in review, what's the steps to healthy aging? Moving your body with exercise, caloric restriction, watching our food choices, sleeping enough, using conventional medicine for preventive care, avoiding medications when possible, working on your spirit, nourishing your passions, getting the right natural supplements. And I just wanted to make a quick mention about genetic testing. Genetic testing is in its infancy, but I think it's starting to really open up a lot of information about how our bodies work. And it is something we use in our practice to understand our patients' bodies. And more, I think it's becoming more valuable to help us understand where people might have certain deficits or certain issues that they need more support in. And getting the genes earlier, even in childhood, can be really helpful to even help support the body for a longer period of time, to maybe possibly avoid things in the future. So what did Hippocrates use? Hippocrates used healthy food, sunlight, exercise, He got people into water therapies like hot and cold baths, and he gave them herbs. And that's what he recommended for most conditions and for long life and good health. So in a way, I'm not really recommending that much more, that much different. Maybe we have some specifics that Hippocrates didn't know about back then, but the general idea is really the same thing. All right, so that's about it. Please do join us on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm happy to answer a couple of questions with the time we have left.
Yeah, so if you can just thank you, Dr. Peter. That was really great. If you can just send in your questions, they'll be probably sent anonymously, and I'll read them and send them through to Dr. Bongiorno. And while you have a moment to do that, again, I just wanted to thank you for that. You covered a lot in a very efficient amount of time, and I think the phrase you said about the Dalai Lama and reading his tweets might be the first time that's ever been said in the history.
Yeah, honestly, I don't read too many people's tweets or get them on my phone where they show up, but I think his are worth it.
Sure, how far we've come, though, right? That he's probably not tweeting, but someone's tweeting on his behalf. But I think also, this topic is so broad. For me, that was really highlighted with the woman who lived to 118 and said that she ate bacon every day. And that really speaks to our body's ability to be very adaptive, but also to the complex nature of this phenomenon. Most people have heard of something like the French paradox, where people eat pastas and breads and they drink wine. Well, what is it about that still allows people to not have high cholesterol and heart disease in some of these parts of the world? Sardinia, Italy, you mentioned the blue zones. One of the things we find there is community, sitting around the dinner table with a group of your elders and sharing in that. There's a really strong evolutionary benefit to that. And so I think what I appreciate about your talk was that it did cover all of those foundational components and isn't just, take this supplement for this disease or for healthy aging, because they're out there. There's a lot of marketing around this wonder vitamin, lots of them, antioxidants found somewhere in the Amazon. And so I just really want to reiterate what Dr. Bongiorno said, that all of these foundational things really matter. And I see that in my practice. So I've got a couple questions coming in. Why don't we take maybe 3 or 4? The first one is probably very relevant for most people. I like foods that I know are unhealthy, like fries and pizza every once in a while. Does this mean that I can never eat them if we know what foods are helpful for healthy aging?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so am I never allowed? Do I have to live like an ascetic, or basically live in a puritanical way? And the answer is no. If people are eating really healthily and doing all of these things most of the time, you should get pretty much all of the there's like that 80-20 rule. If you do 80% of it, you should get most of the benefits. So, I grew up in a very Sicilian household, and there's a lot of foods which I don't recommend on a daily basis that I do love. I do love pasta. I love pizza. For taste-wise, I'd probably eat them every day, but I know they're not healthy for me. Do I have them as an occasional treat? Sure. But I think if you're having them, if I have pasta, like let's say once every 2 months, and I'm exercising regularly and generally not eating too much food, and it's fine. It's okay to do. You have to know your body. Of course, if you're allergic to it or it creates a lot of inflammation, then that's a different story. So you have to know your body when you make those decisions. And, I have a lot of issues with dairy products as well. And I used to be sick all the time when I was a kid. And as I got healthy for myself and I got rid of them, I started feeling so much better. Now, I eat them every once in a blue moon. And I know the next day I'm going to feel very phlegmy and I'm going to have a lot of congestion. And I'm almost choosing that. And as long as I do that very rarely, it's fine, So I don't limit, and I take some enzymes to help that as well. And so this way I don't feel like I'm completely stopping all of it and I can never have it again and then I feel deprived. But I make sure it's just a very, very occasional treat. And I think you should know your body and know what an occasional treat means for you. So this way, if you want to indulge, you can every once in a while without having ramifications of it.
Great, thank you. So some of these questions coming in are probably pretty specific to people's needs. So I encourage you to reach out to Dr. Peter, maybe to set up a consult if you have some specific needs. But this one that I know is another hot topic for people, and people are asking about it nearly every day. The question is marijuana bad for my long-term health?
Oh, marijuana. Yeah, it's such a hot topic, especially now it's getting legalized. Well, so to quickly answer, because I do need to go soon, in my opinion, marijuana under the age of 25 is not good for the brain. Studies do show that especially regular marijuana use does rewire the brain in not a healthy way, and it can increase later on getting things like anxiety and paranoia and even psychotic episodes. So I think in a youngster under 25, really, it shouldn't be used for those reasons. Now, I'm not judging them, but I'm just saying from a practical neurological standpoint, it's not healthy. I think after that age, I think occasional use, is probably fine. The way people ever occasionally drink alcohol and they relax and they feel okay and they're in a community, it's good. But if you're using marijuana regularly to kind of get away from your feelings, or because you're so anxious and you're kind of doing it alone, and then I don't think that's a healthy thing. And then I think, you should explore why you're feeling that way. What's the reasons you're using the marijuana? What are you trying to get away from? And then really work on that. Work with your naturopathic doctor, work with a psychologist. So same thing with alcohol, right? If you're having it occasionally and it's enjoyable and it's not a problem, then that's okay. But if you're using it regularly and you're using it to get away from life, then I think that's when I think it's a problem.
Great. Okay. Well, and I know you have to get back to a pretty busy patient day, so why don't we leave it there? If you have any other questions, please do email us. You see that email on there, info@innersourcehealth.com, and we'll get it routed to any provider who might be helpful. And I just want to give a nod to these are all being recorded, and definitely make sure to keep an eye out. There's a link on our website that says Keep Up with ISH or Inner Source Health, just to make sure you're aware of future webinars and future events. We're always giving talks, giving lectures, and we're always available. If your company or even a large enough group wants to get together and have a talk from us, we do these all over New York City, all over Long Island, sometimes even out in Connecticut. So do reach out. We're always available to you. And our mission here is really ensuring that people know that both naturopathic medicine and Chinese medicine are a valuable tool as they navigate their health. And we really want to bring that education to as many people as possible. So thank you once again, Dr. Bongiorno. Thank you everyone who's joined us. And we look forward to hearing from you and hopefully seeing you soon.